Mr. President.
On today's World Insight, U.S. policy reversals on COVID, immigration, and the climate on day one of the Biden administration. Off to a great start in crisis-hit America? And with the new president in the White House, is it going to be business as usual between China and the U.S. or business unusual? Answers from the president of the U.S. China Business Council.
That this competition should be managed and should remain respectable.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
This is World Inside, and I'm Tian Wei. The show is coming to you live from Beijing. We begin today's program with the U.S. new administration. Joe Biden was sworn in as the 46th American president on Wednesday at the west front of the Capitol, which was breached 2 weeks ago by a mob trying to overturn his election victory. Biden and his team are diving straight into running a country rocked earlier already by multiple crises, as he signed a series of executive actions that reversed his predecessor's signature policies on the very first day of his term.
To the next President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
The United States is ushering in a new era in leadership, with Biden taking the oath at noon on Wednesday. He offered a message of unity in a deeply divided country, reeling from a tanking economy and a raging pandemic.
We've come so far, but we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain.
Hours after the inauguration, President Biden signed 17 executive actions on the COVID pandemic, economic fallout, immigration, the environment, and climate change. One of the president's executive actions was a mask mandate on federal property. He also sought to return the U.S. back to the 2015 Paris Climate Accord and the World Health Organization. Biden put forth a sweeping immigration overhaul to end several hardline immigration policies put in place by Trump and formally revoke the permit needed to build the Keystone XL oil pipeline. Earlier this month, Biden also unveiled his economic rescue plan, which includes a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, plus a slew of ambitious directives for a broader, long-term economic recovery. The new president's quick actions have drawn opposition at home, while other countries are closely observing his follow-up plans. China's foreign ministry expressed hope relations with the U.S. could have a better future through joint efforts.
For more on Biden's inauguration and the course he aspires to change for his country, we are joined in our Shanghai studio, Shending Li, professor from the Institute of International Studies at Fudan University. Joining us via Skype in Washington, D.C., Cheng Li, director and senior fellow at the John Thornton China Center with the Brookings Institution. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Mr. Li, changing the words of the executive order can be done overnight. Changing a country, though, that is deeply divided can't be done overnight. How much do you think, at the very beginning of his term, the new president in the United States will be able to rally the crowd?
Well, this is a new day in America, and there should be a new chapter in U.S.-China relations. And Biden, during the campaign and also after he won the election, he repeatedly said that Trump's China policy is a failure. And also during the campaign and also the first few weeks about the election, he said it was Russia, not China, that interfered in the U.S. election. Trump and his hawkish team blame everything to China, and create a lot of lies about China on what also they similar to what they did on other things. So Biden sees China and Russia very differently. He focused on competition and not confrontation. For him, China is not an enemy. So that's very clear regarding U.S.-China relations. But also for America, that he immediately changed in terms of some of the policies, like COVID-19, like climate change, and many other things, particularly racial tensions. So I think that he also has a strong diplomatic team that understand U.S.-China relations. I can mention Janet Yellen, Tony Blinken, Jack Sullivan, John Kerry, and William Burns. These are a really wonderful group of people. Now, we should put in the perspective regarding China-U.S. relations. This is your audience most interested.
Before we do that, let's have also Professor Shen to answer that question. Professor Shen, my question really is, one might be able to sign 17 executive order overnight, but to change a country overnight is much harder than putting in words at the inauguration speech. Mr. Shen. Yeah,
I agree. But if you take action every day, especially by sending the message that the new government would take action from day one, and they would take systematic and persistent action, I think they want to implement their words into action. And in this way, America could make a progress, and those people in different end of this political polarization might have chance to reconcile their difference. So I think Biden tried to put Americans together to stress his unity.
Mr. Li, if you think about it, he pretty much has a lot of wind in his direction. First of all, the Democrats are having both the Senate and the House, and now the White House. Secondly, there seems to be a lot of empathy and sympathy toward him and his administration, both within the country and also from different parts of the world for it to succeed. And thirdly, there seems to be also the crowd that he will be able to rally, at least at the very beginning, because of the performances of his predecessor. So all of this, how much do you think momentum will be able to get him to do what he really desired to do, which is to bring, in his words, unity?
Well, crisis is always an opportunity. So we will yet to see whether he and his team are up to the challenge. But he already made it very clear, put the 4 important agenda. Start with COVID-19. If we believe that leadership is important, he certainly showed his leadership. And today's news in U.S. that the actual Trump administration did not leave any, storage about vaccines. This is really itself is a scandal. So I think Biden and his team very, very clear. This is top agenda. The second is the American economy, and the third is the racial discrimination against the minorities. It's very, very important. And finally, climate change. These are all right policies. Now, that's his mandate. But at the same time, that the challenge is real. We should not remember that 74 million people voted for Donald Trump. Trump is left, but Trumpism is still there. Yes, you mentioned about the Congress, the representative and senator and the White House. That's true. He got the older majority. But this is not overwhelming majority. There's a lot of criticism and concern. So it's really a very difficult situation. So the long list he needs to do is overwhelming. So again, and only time can tell, but we wish his success, because U.S. problem is also global problem to a certain extent. It's because it's not a zero-sum game. So we should certainly hope that he will be successful in that regard.
Certainly the world has experienced that, and I also understand very well it's not a zero-sum game. Professor Shen, on the other hand, if you look at the COVID situation, the U.S. is likely to have a darker winter before it goes to a brighter spring, let's just put it that way, without really mentioning the figures because it's quite sad and tragic. Having said that, though, how to assemble a more efficient process and system to work and really make sure vaccines are going to reach the public and the masks as well. These are just, sounds like easy job, but when it comes to real practice on the ground, it's not. It is a test of capabilities. Professor Shen, what's your observation?
Well, situation at the moment has been quite green. But I feel, yes, that yesterday when I saw the inauguration from TV, I saw those participants of the event, they wore masks. That's good. For day one, the new president has placed his executive order that on the federal premises, all people should wear masks. That's good. But that's not enough. He should take the leadership to make all people at a time of necessity to wear masks. Then it attests the U.S. federal government capability and how they could lead the state government. That takes some time. We should have the patience to give time to the new leadership. And also, he should develop his leadership to make people to follow him. And that would take time, and some people projected that still for the next 1 or 2 months, the U.S. is going to have very serious situation. And I really feel sad for this to happen. But probably by April, by June, situation would much improve.
Yeah. We are not epidemiologists. However, we also know, as President Biden himself put it, Dr. Li, that the U.S. Should prefer to lead with the power of example, not the power itself. Having said that, though, after rejoining the WHO and also the Paris Climate Accord, how much will U.S. be able to exercise its international responsibility rather than just tending its own garden? That will be another test for this new administration.
Well, absolutely. That certainly that Biden's approach and Trump's approach about international cooperation is very, very different. And Biden, as he repeatedly said that Trump alienated American allies and alienated international community, and certainly put the relationship with China also in a very dangerous situation. And certainly that gives him the opportunity for Biden administration to clean up the house. But it's difficult that what happened in January 6th is really undermine American image. And the United States, as Sandini just mentioned, is still a very divided country. So I think that you need to persuade the American people, the credibility, and and also return to some of the American kind of values, because it's really severely damaged by January 6th particularly, but also by the past 4 years. I think racial tensions, and it's really the things that it's very much like a cancer in American society. So it's a difficult challenge, and but at least that we have a new leadership, we have the new agenda, the right agenda. I think that so to regain the international kind of understanding and respect will take some time. And also among these things, the U.S.-China relation is also very, very crucial.
That's really what I want to follow up by asking the two of you who are really experts in the field. It is another huge test of this administration to be able to not only to handle its domestic issue better, but also to focus on some of the most important strategic relationships, such as that between China and the United States. We have heard certain words coming from hearings of administration officials. We have also been hearing about some kinds of, some kind of contacts between the two sides, at least at the various levels, to talk about the future. So now, Dr. Li and Professor Shen, what do you consider will be the best options and the entry points for the two countries to find somewhat a general way of dealing with one another, at least for the year 2021, when everyone is still fighting against this global pandemic, when the new administration in the U.S. still has to focus pretty much on its domestic division? Professor Shen.
As my good friend Mr. Li has mentioned, that President Biden has positioned China as a competitor and not a strategic rival. That's good. And I do think with the U.S. returning to the international community for Paris Climate Change Accord and JCPOA and WHO, China-U.S. are going to have more cooperation instead of confrontation. For instance, to deal with the pandemic, China-U.S. need to better exchange information and better work together to support the WHO to extend its resource and vaccine to Africa and to those who need them. And China have some, and the U.S. have some. U.S. should not leave the WHO, should return and to give the resource to WHO. China, U.S. may support WHO for relevant kind of a scientific investigation. If the U.S. has some stories that we can learn, and if America could join the WHO team to go to China, we should reduce our suspicion, but rather we should help each other to build the science to beat the virus. And U.S. want China to buy more, and China-U.S. did cut first phase agreement on trade and economy last January 15th, and how China-U.S. need to work together to better implement this, rather than to impose China on more rigid so-called strategic reform, which should come later or which should be discussed in a cooperative way, rather than beating China and viewing China as an enemy. I think there are a lot of areas where the two countries could cooperate.
Yeah, we have been hearing this list a long time ago. Certainly now it's the time to work on it. But having said that, though, all of these didn't come without any reason. Misinformation, mismanagement, the misbehavior, and also some of the misunderstanding existing between the two countries over the past 4 years and beyond have paving the way for some of the wrong policies. Now, Dr. Li, the question is, how can we address the root cause? That probably is much more important. Start from day one.
Well, before that, let me add what Sengding said. I think that China-U.S. relation for Biden administration is not on the top agenda, not the top priority. But having said that, 3 out of the 4 top agenda are related to China. COVID-19, there's no such a thing called a national cure, only a global cure. U.S.-China have a lot of reason to collaborate, especially the vaccine production and the global distribution. And on the economic recovery, these are the 2 largest economies in the world. For climate change, China's participation is essential. So I just want to add that the American public support understand that, and the medical and business communities certainly support that. And most importantly, in my view, the state and local governments, they are actually bipartisan. The governors and the mayors support that. I hope that the Biden administration will see that opportunity to promote cooperation. Now, for your question, I think that the emphasis is very, very important. You used the term early on. I think the Chinese should have better understanding about the United States. And no matter what, the different perspective, what it is true is that over the past 2 or 3 decades, the world experienced the largest transfer of wealth from United States to China. So you should understand how Americans feel that. When China's middle class is expanding, U.S. middle class is shrinking. I think that both sides should abandon zero-sum game thinking. And I think the economic and the trade are not necessarily the driving force. At the time, economic disparity is hitting the United States, just like also hitting China. I think what we should emphasize is this kind of international public good and the local initiatives. I think it's very, very important at this moment.
Empathy, how would you like that, Professor Shen?
Well, President Xi Jinping used to say, for others to comment on China, they had better to sit in China's chair, China's bench, and wear China's shoe. This is what is empathy meant. We should situate ourselves in others' position and think the others' way and share the others' pain. So now at this time when the U.S. is hugely stricken by this pandemic infliction, I think Chinese government and people have all the reason to know that America has been hurt, and let's extend our hand to America. But they should be in a position to accept rather than blame China to initiate all this kind of violence. So I think U.S. has a grand new chance rather than challenge, because they changed their government. And we would continue to extend our hand to them, and I think this opens a new window.
All right.
Instead of confrontation, China-U.S. could work on a long list of potential cooperative projects.
Professor Shengding Li, Dr. Cheng Li, what a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm sure as we go on and the world is changing once again, I would love to invite your insights in our program also. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and be safe. Thank you. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Coming up in the program, with Biden in the White House, is it going to be business as usual between China and the U.S. or business as usual? Answers from the president of U.S. China Business Council, Craig Allen, right after these reminders. This is World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. U.S. President Joe Biden takes the steering wheel of the world's largest economy that's still reeling from a raging COVID pandemic. Unemployment remains high. 1 million Americans made jobless claims for the first time in January, though some sectors like housing are bouncing back. Across the Pacific, China reported a whopping 6.5% growth in the fourth quarter of 2020. And contrary to what former President Donald Trump set out to do, the U.S. trade deficit with China grew in the last 4 years. U.S. direct investments into China also went up. So how should the world's two largest economies engage with each other under a new U.S. administration? I asked Craig Allen, president of U.S. China Business Council. Let's hear his answers. Congratulations that you have a new administration, a new president coming into the office. But the question about China-U.S. trade relations remains. How much prospect do you see in that relationship for the next 4 years?
Well, the last 4 years have been very difficult and interesting, and U.S. exports have fallen dramatically over the last 2 years in particular. So we're coming off of a difficult period. I think that the next 4 years will be more predictable and more stable, with less government and political risk. That said, no doubt there will be many unexpected challenges as the two governments try to reach a new equilibrium. I think that that's quite a large challenge, and we'll have to see how that develops. But I do expect the Chinese economy to do well and American companies to remain interested in exporting and investing in China.
A lot of the misinformation about China-U.S. trade relations have been spreading over the past few years. And in fact, a lot of facts have been ignored. How much do you think the course will be corrected, at least in that regard?
Well, I think that the basic economic facts are well known. I think it's also true that the interpretation of the facts by the Trump administration did not always follow normal economic logic. One example of that would be the tariffs. Tariffs are not a good way to address trade problems or to reduce a trade deficit. So I think that a relook at the economic fundamentals underlying the relationship is well overdue, is very welcome, and will be helpful as we move forward. Now, that's not to say that there will be no problems. I fully expect different problems, but hopefully tariffs and continual confrontation will not be the approach that both governments use against each other. Rather, we should explore opportunities for collaboration and coordination as appropriate.
Mr. Allen, what do you think the business community that you are representing here in the U.S., the U.S. China Business Council, are looking in for the policies of this new administration? If they ask you, what advice or suggestion would you provide to them when they are coming into the office anew? What did you say to them?
Well, the U.S.-China relationship is big and important. China is our largest overseas market. Canada and Mexico are a little larger, but they're not overseas, and we need to get our policies right. The second thing that we need to address is that American companies don't appreciate the tariffs. By and large, both the import tariffs as well as the counter tariffs put on by the Chinese government have had negative effects for American companies. And therefore, we wish to see a lifting of the tariffs in the near term. But in return for the lifting of the tariffs, what we would like to see is greater market access in China, greater market liberalization. We do believe that opening of the Chinese domestic market to foreign competition would be good for China, would supplement and expand Chinese economic growth. And so we're hopeful that there will be additional agreements between the two governments and a rapid lifting of tariffs. But those should go together. And as soon as possible.
But on the other hand, Mr. Allen, how much persuasive power does the business community have over the course of this new administration, which has to deal with a very divided United States and the political complexities of a country as big as the United States? Mr. Allen, I think that has become an increasingly interesting question, isn't it?
It is a very interesting question, and many ways to approach that question. While the voice of CEOs and presidents of companies are respected, it's really data about jobs and long-term economic impact and productivity that is really going to make the difference. I don't think that elite politics, if you will, the voices of corporate interests, is going to sway the new administration. Rather, arguments about jobs, about America's role in the world, about geopolitical stability, about increases in exports and the role of manufacturing and agriculture in our economy, that's what the new team is interested in. And I think there that China's positive growth story is quite compelling. We are looking at very rapid growth in 2021 and probably 2022. And American companies would like to be a part of that growth, and we wish to participate in the Chinese economy in a fulsome manner. I also have to note that when trade and national security issues intersect, national security issues usually win. And thus, we have to be careful about how we define national security.
That's right.
And ensure that economic security and economic growth is part of our national security calculus. And I hope that our Chinese friends do the same as well in Beijing.
The United States now really need to rebrand itself and also probably reposition itself, because after the past 4 years, the world really has been changing, and people's perceptions about the United States has also been changing based on quite some facts. So, Mr. Allen, how much will the earlier approach that the U.S. has, the U.S. business community has, and the U.S. government has toward the rest of the world, including toward China, still work? How much do you think inside your country it is also a correct the course while testing the water period to know who exactly you are while you are trying to tell people, let's be who we are?
Well, I think that your question is interesting. About 200 years ago, a Frenchman by the name of de Tocqueville visited America. And he said in his book of 200 years ago that America's greatest asset was the ability to reinvent itself. And I think that that is profoundly correct. The United States has recently gone through an election that has led to a peaceful change of government and a shift in political parties in the Senate. And this is a new day that is dawning. And I'm sure that by the end of this day, that America will have rejoined, for example, the Paris Climate Agreement, and will have rejoined the WHO. That's a pretty good work for one day. So I think that the United States is based on democratic principles, and the will of the people will prevail. And we are seeing a new government come into place that I think that we should all wish to be successful and integrating and leading in the world. That is for the good of the world and the good of the United States. And we have the team in place, in my view, to accomplish exactly that. So let's see how this develops. And let us hope that it leads to a period of greater stability, prosperity, health, and peace for all.
If you think about over the past 4 years, of course, the U.S. took a lot of initiative that has changed the world. Of course, change itself probably even more. But at the same time, the world has also been shaping up their own logic as well, despite absence of the United States. China's RCEP, China-EU investment treaty, a lot has been going on, not to mention CPTPP, in which Japan and some of the other economies are leading the role. The WTO also needs to be reformed, but how, it's still up in the air. So my point is, Mr. Allen, how fast can the U.S. catch up? What is the best entry point for the U.S. to catch up?
The question of how the U.S. Should re-engage, I think, is an interesting one. We are going to rejoin the WHO and the Paris Accords on day one. So that's a very good sign, in my view. I think that perhaps on day 2 or day 3, you will see additional moves. The Biden team has made 2 what I think are compelling arguments about America's role in the world. Number 1, that we need to ensure that the United States is strong, secure, and confident. And therefore, there will be an initial emphasis on tackling COVID appropriately. And I think that everyone would agree that that is a appropriate priority for the early part of the Biden administration. The second principle that the Biden administration is following is working closely with friends and allies. the United States has alliances going back to World War II or even before throughout the world, and those relationships are important, and they have not been well tended over the last 4 years. And so there's going to be an emphasis on working with those friends and allies in Europe, in Asia, and elsewhere. And I think that that's important. The United States alliance structure remains fully intact and as important as ever before. And so working with our allies to achieve our goals, I think, is an important step forward. Let's give this a little bit of time and then discuss in a month or two how different the world looks.
I would love to do that. In a month or two, have another conversation with you to check about the realities. And finally, before we go, Mr. Allen, the unpredictability that has been there for years. And at the transition time, there's still also enormous amount. So how do you think a business community, the one that you're representing, should be able to adapt to all these unpredictabilities and prepare both for the best and also for the worst?
The business community has to be fully compliant with laws wherever they are.
Yeah.
And the American companies in China take great pride in following the law and being a good corporate citizen in China. And Chinese companies in America do the same. The problem becomes if there is a conflict of law, that if a Chinese company in America or an American company of China, as they try to follow laws in both countries, find that there is a conflict and they have to choose one or another, then you have a real difficulty that governments need to look at. It is in neither the Chinese government interest or the American government interest to create that situation. And indeed, I am hopeful that we will be able to diplomatically negotiate and work together to ensure that that doesn't happen or that it is at a minimum.
So, Mr. Allen, there's a lot of concern about unpredictability from the U.S. side, from investors, including those from China particularly.
Well, I think both Chinese history and American history have many episodes of unrest and uncertainty. In both cases, the center has held for many years. The center will hold. We're moving on to a much more, to a different administration. That's not to say that the problems will disappear. The United States is a democracy. Everything is contested. Everything is public. However, we have an unusual ability to reform and to adjust to circumstances. We have been doing that with the same Constitution for 240 years. And I think that you can bet that we will continue to do so for the next 240 years. The issue is, how do we interact with the world, and particularly with the other great power in the world, and that is China. And that is for us, for the American citizens and the citizens of China to decide. It is not chance, it is not fate, it is not coincidence. It will be decided by the good people of the United States and the good people of China. And I think that what we decide to do is to compete, to prosper, to grow stronger together. And that is not inevitable. That will take a lot of work. But I think our diplomats, our militaries, our businesses, our people are ready for that. wish to avoid confrontation and to prosper together. And it's the job of governments to ensure that that happens. So that is the direction that both governments should head. And let us see if that is actually going to be manifest in the months and the years ahead.
Craig Allen, President of U.S. China Business Council. Always a pleasure. That's my conversation with the President of U.S. China Business Council, Craig Allen. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching and bye for now.